Okay, my name's Amardeep Bassey. I'm a journalist, a freelance journalist, and also a lecturer. I've been a journalist now for near enough 30 years. Born and brought up in Wolverhampton. I've always worked in the West Midlands region, West Midlands and Birmingham in particular. Again, I've always kind of specialised in community affairs. And a place like Birmingham, I think there's something like 120 different nationalities call Birmingham home, and I've had the privilege of reporting out of quite a few of those communities. I'm just a proper West Midlands lad through and through. Initially, it was unlike a lot of people from my community. I'm British, Sikh, Punjabi by background. A lot of my peers were kind of into maths and sciences, and they wanted to be doctors, and obviously some of that was parental pressure and whatever. But very few people who looked like me wanted to do anything to do with English or the arts and everything. But I was always that way inclined. I never liked science. I never liked maths. I always liked English. I always liked reading. I remember from a very early age, I used to read anything from labels on shampoos to every billboard that I used to go past. I just would read it. And then I thought, well, what can I do with English language? And plus, I always generally like to know what's going on in the world. Again, like a lot of us of our age, our parents used to make us watch the news and say, switch that Grange Hill off, put the news on. And so, I was interested in news, and I thought, well, where can I utilise my English skills and current affairs? And I thought, well, journalism, let's give that a go. Well, I did a bit of research. I'd done my degree by then. I'd done a degree in English in London at a place called Goldsmiths College. And by about the second year of that degree, it was a 3-year degree, I knew I wanted to be a journalist. And then it was a case of, well, practically, what do I need to do? I've got, probably going to get this degree, but is there anything else I need to learn? And I found out there's this one particular course run by an organisation called the National Council for the Training of Journalists. And they basically have a qualification, which is the standard for any journalist, where they teach you shorthand, the law, the basics to be a newspaper journalist, basically. And at that time, there was only 3 or 4 colleges in the whole country that did this NCTJ course. Now you can do it in practically every college in the country. But then there was only Sheffield, Cardiff and Lancaster that did it. So I went to Sheffield. Basically, it was just a normal college, and spent a year there getting my qualification as a NCTJ qualified journalist.
What was the journey?
Well, I went straight into the deep end, in that normally the career route for most journalists was you get your qualification, you go and work for a local newspaper, maybe a free newspaper, just to get some experience under your belt and writing, and you end up doing very local stories, council meetings and check presentations and somebody's diamond anniversary and all that kind of stuff. And I didn't want to do that. I wanted to go straight in and do the big stories. So I went to the world of press agencies, which is quite a secret world, really, in that most of the news you read in your local newspaper or any newspaper hasn't been written by journalists from that newspaper. So about 80% of what you read in the Sun or the Mirror hasn't been written by Sun or Mirror journalists. It's been bought, paid for from a press agency, who will have sent their own journalists out. And every major city in the UK had its own press agency, so that anything that happens in Birmingham, that press agency would send their reporters out, get words and pictures, and then call up every single national newspaper and say, do you want to buy our words and pictures, rather than sending your own staff down from London. So I started off in a Birmingham's biggest press agency, which was called News Team, and it was brilliant. I mean, yeah, we were thrown in the deep end because you're writing copy from the Times to the Sun. All the top newspapers are looking at your copy, so it's got to be good. It's got to be detailed. You're working to very tight deadlines because it's a matter of minutes. If you we used to call it filing it copy. So when you're actually ringing in your story and somebody on the other end is, well, back in the day they used to be on typewriters writing down what you're saying. If somebody has beaten you to that filing your story by 10 minutes, you're not going to get paid. They're going to get paid. So there was real rivalry. I mean, we used to do things like I'd file my copy in a phone box, in a public phone box, till I'd smash the phone so that my rival can't then use that same phone and take money out of my mouth, basically. So the press agency, eventually I worked my way up to becoming news editor there. And again, the normal career route is you work at a press agency, and because you're doing all your stories for the London papers, when you send your story to the London papers, they will see your name on it. So normally you would get poached by a London newspaper saying, "We want you, we've been seeing your copy, you're very good." And so I had offers from London, but I was, it might sound sad, but I was too much of a Birmingham, Wolverhampton lad to want to leave my hometown. You know, London's nice for a weekend, London's nice to make a bit of money, but live there? Nah, I thought, nah, I'm going to stay in Wolves, I'm going to stay in Birmingham. And then it was a case of, well, what do I do in Birmingham? You know, all the main media is in London. Realistically, what am I going to do? And again, to be honest with you, I was getting a bit tired because the pressure at the news agency was so high. You know, long hours. We had a pager back in those days. You know, and so you were always on call. A story could break at any time. So sometimes you get called at midnight. So something's happening. Turns out it's nothing. And so I wanted to slow down a little bit. And so I joined the local newspaper, the Birmingham Mail, because I thought I knew it was going to be easier. You know, less pressure. And so that's what I did. I joined the Birmingham Mail. I didn't stay in the Mail very long. They've got a sister paper called the Sunday Mercury, which is basically the Sunday version of the Birmingham Mail. And I found that my writing and the kind of stories I was chasing was more suitable to a Sunday newspaper, where you got a bit more time to get your story together. Your story's a bit longer. You can do kind of an in-depth investigation. You don't have to turn stories around, you know, in 24 hours. And so my kind of style naturally lent itself to Sunday Mercury, and I stayed there for a good 10 years and sort of was investigations editor there. And yeah, it taught me a lot. I mean, when you work for a news agency, you're a bit like a maverick. You're working for every newspaper. So if somebody said to me, if I was working for the news agency and somebody said to me, well, who do you work for? I could say anybody. I could say the Sun, the Daily, anybody I chose, because I was working for them, essentially. But what working for a local newspaper taught me was, and it was a really good lesson to have, was responsibility, in that my name now was appearing at the bottom of every story. Therefore, I had a responsibility now. That looks my reputation. It's my name. People know if I've messed up, they know who to come back to now. Before, you know, my stories would be changed by somebody in London, then somebody else's name would go on it. And so we were always kind of in the background. But now, there's my name. There's no getting away from it. I wrote this story, and if somebody wants to complain, they know exactly who wrote it. And so it gave me a bit of responsibility in that. Before, it was almost a game for me. It's like, these are just words. I'm just going to try and be as clever as I can with my words and write a really nice story, not realising that actually what you're writing here could dramatically change someone's life, while words that you're playing around with are actually messing around with somebody's real life. And that lesson I learned really strongly at the Mercury, where, you know, these aren't just words that go out into space and nobody cares. That if I write something, it could have bad consequences for somebody, and I've got to, you know, be responsible for that. Well, I always wanted to teach. I always felt that, you know, towards the end of my career as a journalist, I want to go into teaching. Hopefully, I don't think I'm anywhere near the end of my career as a journalist, but the opportunity came to teach, where I'd done some guest lecturing at Birmingham University, Sheffield University, and I really enjoyed it. Just, you know, talking to students about my time as a journalist and kind of giving them some basic pointers about, you know, how to get on in journalism. And I found it really satisfying. And so when an opportunity arose at De Montfort University in Leicester, where it's one of only 2 universities in the country that does a master's in investigative journalism, which is my field. And so an opportunity arose where there was some regular guest lecturing slot. And so for about a year I did that, really enjoyed it. And then a kind of permanent, albeit part-time post turned up at the same university. I kind of jumped at that. And so for the last 2 years I've been a senior lecturer in investigative journalism on the master's course at De Montfort, and have loved it. I should have done it much earlier on in my career. I find it really satisfying, and really what I really would want to do now, and my idea of teaching is, you know, I know the background I came from, I know the difficulties I faced, I remember the lack of peers I had, or role models, or anybody I could aspire to be who looks like me. And so I really want to use the fact that I've kind of, you know, done a lot of journalism, got a decent reputation as a journalist, to now be able to transfer my knowledge to people from a similar background to me. And when I say similar background, kind of working class, inner city, you know, relatively poor, has seen a lot of racism over their time, and just to show people that you can do it too. In fact, if anything, there's a need for you. The media organisations are calling out for people from ethnic communities to get into journalism, and I would always advise any young up-and-coming aspiring journalist to be a good journalist. You don't want to be pigeonholed early on in your career as, oh, he only ever does black stories, or he only ever does Asian stories. Use those. Being Asian, your colour and your cultural skills are part of your tool set, just like being good at language. So, use those tools, but just be wary of either being pigeonholed yourself or allowing others to pigeonhole you as, well, he only ever does stories that are in the ghetto or involving trauma or bad stuff. Become a good qualified journalist, be a good all-round journalist, and then start finding your niche and your mark. I think it's quite sad, and a real empty hole in that the media is one of the biggest things that society plays a massive role in society, especially today's media, where there's an overlap between social media, between TV. Those lines have become a bit blurred, and so mastering media is just a good life skill these days. And if you can become the person who's setting the agenda rather than following it, all the better.